to the Advertising Hour with me, Scott Colnut. Today I've got my special guest with me, and that's Raj Goodman Anand, founder and CEO of Goodman Lantern, and also of GoPin Leads. Hello to you, Raj.
Hey, Scott, how's it going?
Very well, thank you. It was really good to just have that conversation with you a moment ago. And for context, for anyone that's listening, Raj was asking me about why am I interested in podcasting and how did this podcast come about? And I was just explaining to Raj that I've actually just recorded a whole conversation about that with James Mulvaney from the Match podcast from matchmaker.fm. So if you want to hear my thoughts on that, go check out that. But today we're not going to be talking about me, thankfully, because I'm not very good at talking about myself. I'm going to be talking to Raj about his career, his background in the area of software development, entrepreneurialism, probably a lot of content production in here as well, and marketing technology and trends in marketing technology. So there's loads to cover, and I've said thank you to you already, but thanks again I appreciate anyone that takes the time out to come on this podcast. Before we dive into the deep questions and the curiosities of content, can you maybe introduce yourself and a little bit more about your background for anyone that's listening, please?
Yeah, sure, Scott. So this is, my name is Raj. This is my third business, Goodman Lantern, which is a team of native English content writers. We help customers grow faster and sell better. My second business was based in Brighton, which I believe, Scott, you're based in at the moment in the UK.
Live and direct. Yep,
live
right
and
now.
direct, indeed. Which was in the events space, specifically hen parties, sold online. And before that, my first business was a social media software business, which is a white label software business targeting many travel companies and government organizations. So I've had, I've sold one company in the past, was acquired. One company went tits up, but lots of good experiences and lots of learnings. And I feel really fortunate to be sort of be able to talk about the good and the bad. And I really enjoy entrepreneurship. That's my sort of real sort of my jam. I really enjoy entrepreneurship and business. And technology is been my sort of my pet for as long as I remember. I mean, when I was sort of 7 years old, I was programming in BASIC, for instance, which is obviously very, very simple, but it's still something which I really feel a strong passion for. And I hope for many years to come, I'll be in technology and business.
Maybe that's a good starting point, is that I'm not going to go through all of your background and all your history. We'll probably touch on that as we're talking, but I am interested in the Goodman Lantern origin story. So if you could maybe speak on how Goodman Lantern came to be what it is today and a little bit more about the services that you offer.
Sure. So before Goodman Lantern was born, I was working for a European company where I joined them as product director and eventually became their CEO. I helped them grow from 7.5 million to 45 million euros, actually pounds of revenue. It was 55 million in euros. And really the story was that the company is in B2B, selling to insurance, telecom industry. And one thing lacking there was obviously a bit of product, but also storytelling. So really the aim was to help form a narrative, a story, and content was something which played a massive, massive role within that company to go into larger organizations. We were selling into organizations which we could only dream about. And by the end of my sort of tenure with them, we were working with 50% of the Spanish and the Latin American market of insurance and telecom companies. So a massive chunk of companies. And they loved our story. They loved our global approach to business and our focus on innovation. That was the key message there. So I thought, hang on, this you can help companies sell so much more. Why can't I do this for myself? And actually, I was doing 280 flights per year for them. Trying to sell business all around Asia and the UK. I'm like, I need to set up a company which I can run from a boat in the middle of the ocean. And back then there wasn't the fun, this whole nomenclature of remote companies. Obviously now we call them remote companies. Back then we called them a company in the cloud. So we basically formed a company in the cloud, providing native English content writers who really understand the story, the voice, the core values of the company we work with. And that's something we're very passionate about. We don't just write content sort of on a one-off basis. We actually embed ourselves in the customer, really help them form a story, a narrative, and help them sell more and sell better.
So maybe can you help me understand a little bit more about who your target audience is? So who is Goodman Lantern useful for as a service, as a company?
Primarily, our customers are B2B organizations, which are very entrepreneurial in nature. So, we work with a lot of companies in the US and the UK market. But we also work with companies in Europe and Asia as well. But US and UK is our prime focus. Our customers tend to be companies who are using technology to either service the customers or to sell to them. So they don't have digital technology as part of their sales process or as part of their delivery process, then perhaps we are not the right fit for them. When that happens, we really can help them tell the story better. We can help them churn out content for their social media, for their blogs, to help them build a better audience, increase awareness, help them generate leads and conversions. Both inbound is where we're very strong on, but also outbound as well. We help our customers with the three tiers of the sales funnel, which is the top funnel, where we help them understand and get awareness. Middle of the funnel, the mobile part, where we help our customers to educate their clients about their products and their services. And BOFU is the bottom of the funnel, where it's ready to focus on conversion. So email newsletters, for example, landing pages, or call to action stuff. So we do all these three things for our customers, and we partner with them. It's not like, as I say, it's not a short-term commitment. We have a long-term commitment, and from day one, on our dime, we will focus on learning about the company, their vision, their core values, so that we are authentic. And eventually, say by the third month, for example, this is an autopilot. So we can really help them deliver content for them, authentically like them with their voice, and actually put this on hands free for them, so they can focus on their core business, as it were.
Yeah, so the benefits that are really coming through as you're speaking to me are, number one, the ability to scale. So using Goodman Lantern, you can scale content accordingly. You can scale up or down depending on your type of needs. So that's one benefit. And the second benefit seemed to be that you can really help walk them through that process of understanding where they might need content as part of the content funnel. Is that correct?
Yes. So typically when we work with customers, there are three areas we help with. So one is planning. Number two is content creation, and then is execution. Most of our customers will bring us in as it happens for content creation, but actually we are very strong in planning as well. So if the customers are not clear about their strategy, for instance, we can come and help them with the strategy, match it with their current experience, the current customers, and their vision for their prospect customers as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one thing that I had noted to myself, which I thought was unusual, maybe different, and I wanted to talk about, was I haven't seen too many content-orientated or content production companies like yours sell services which are subscription-based. So you have, I can't remember the exact names that you give them, but I think you have 3 different tiers of content production. And I just wanted to know from your perspective whether that was fairly normal for the content production space. It's nothing that I've particularly seen before. And if so, what are the pros and cons do you think for companies out there that are looking to buy a subscription-based content model?
Sure. Well, Scott, the names of the tiers are very well thought about. The names are Plan 1, Plan 2, and Plan 3.
That's maybe why I can't remember them. I thought they might have crazy names or something.
So yes, I mean, it's not usual to have these kind of plans or packages for content. But again, as I'm sure you're aware, Scott, a lot of the times we work with customers, they are they are really good at outbound, or they're really good at sort of building a marketing funnel, for example. But when it comes to scaling up, that's a challenge. And every time we spoke to a customer over the phone, they asked us, well, how does your pricing work? And we said, well, it's actually it's a custom plan, and that doesn't help solve a problem. So we've actually created three plans there, but below those three plans, there's a big section which says custom plans. I would say a lot of our customers would jump on one of these plans first, and then they will change to these custom plans because every company is different. Every style of working is different. So we can, customize our sort of the requirements of the customer in a way which is in sync with their thinking. But these plans give them direction and sort of an idea of cost, for example, as well. We are very sort of open about our approach. For example, the minimum requirement to work with us is for 3 months. But if, for example, a client don't like what we do for them, or is not in line with what we promised them, that they can leave us in the first 2 months. And that's a promise to our customers to say, listen, we we put our mouth where the money is, and we really make sure that we deliver you high value. If we can't do that for you, then really you shouldn't be with us. And so we are very open about that approach as well. These plans, I mean, I would say most of our B2B customers just use these plans straight away. We also work with agencies as well. The agency customers tend to work on custom plans, I would say, typically. But again, it varies quite a bit. Every company is different. It depends if there's a CMO, for example, in the company or not. And if there is a sort of vision already, we work with different kind of companies. And it's important for us to be flexible.
There's something really interesting as you talk there, which I hadn't really thought about too much in the past, and it's a good marketing lesson and a good pricing lesson in that you have three plans, but that doesn't mean that you're restricted to those three plans. So actually, if you're in an industry where you're getting challenged a lot on the packages or your pricing, then maybe one option is just to make sure that you have. I know that psychology will tell you, and studies will tell you that people like packages. People like the certainty of packages and subscription-based packages. But the downside to that is that if you're selling that and that alone, you don't get the flexibility that you might require. So actually, in some cases, like businesses such as yours, it might be a good thing to actually use a tier-based pricing model to get people in the door. And then as they start to become more familiar with your service, look at a custom package as an upsell in the future. So I think that's a really interesting pricing lesson and something I hadn't really thought about too much.
Yeah, and I think also I think it's important to be transparent with customers. So basically, the client comes in and says, we are ABC Limited, which is a $1 billion company. We won't put the prices up for them just because they can afford a higher price. The prices are what they are. We've been transparent about from the word go.
Yeah. So there's something else that you touched on. You used the word that I use quite a lot is authenticity, because for content production, whether that's through, if we're talking about content in the form of just copy alone, whether it's copy for social media, copy for email newsletters, or copy for your website, I think there was maybe a day or a year, if we're talking about a decade ago or 15 years ago, where you could maybe get away with someone else writing copy for your website that didn't come from you. But I think over time, authenticity has become such a critical component of marketing and of advocacy and of brand loyalty that you can't produce copy now that people feel is produced by another agency or another service. So you said that you go through a process of learning a little bit more about companies and learn their tone so that you can deliver content that's authentic. Are you able to speak on that process that you run through? Is that, for example, is that a face-to-face process? Though I imagine that's difficult in a pandemic. Are there any frameworks that you use to make sure that the content you produce is authentic?
Well, when it comes to the content we write for our customers, again, we have customers of different sort of, different brackets, as it were, in different tiers. I'm talking from the point of view of, where they are in their journey. We work with CEOs, we work with CMOs, we work with marketing managers, we work with product managers, for example. And with each one of them, it's a little different because, typically, we believe the culture of the company comes from the top. So the more we can spend time with the person right at the top, the more we can learn about them, which is a bit challenging when it comes to large companies because the CEO is super busy. they probably won't be involved in the content production themselves. But for smaller companies, say between 15 to say even 40 employee companies, that's very possible. And our focus really is to kind of really spend time with them on the phone, do some workshops with them, for instance, to understand that tone. And then it's actually a lot of trial and error. Now, this is a bizarre one because most people will say, listen, whatever you prepare should be the best possible version of things. But although we believe in marketing, marketing is strong because it has the ability to actually do A/B testing. We can actually do sort of different versions of the same content, landing page, blah blah blah, to really understand the exact tone we require. Similarly, when we work with the customers, we give them multiple versions of the same content based on what we have learned from the CEO, the CMO, the marketing person, the product person, for example. And we try to understand, giving them several examples. Listen, which one would you prefer? Which one do you think is more like you? And then we start to spend a lot of time to kind of really understand these people. And remember that every time we actually work with a customer, we have a minimum of 4 people in the team. We have the writer, the editor, digital marketing specialist, and a project manager. The job of the project manager really is to make sure that they are focusing on not only delivery on time, but also to really focus on to work with the digital marketing specialist and the writer to understand the company's tone. At the time we don't understand that tone properly, we still are, a bit handheld by the customer because we don't really understand that really well to be really authentic. So it takes a little bit, back and forth. We actually spend a lot of time to prepare extra copy, extra examples to really understand the tone. Also, before we begin with the customer, we do a lot of sampling. So we give all our customers free trials, for instance, free samples. And when we are working with a customer as well, they get, an opportunity to really work with us on several different drafts of a copy. All of this is to understand and learn about the customer. And then we are actually making internal notes and a knowledge base of the tone, the voice, the vision, the mission. So we have documentation internally, which documents out the ecosystem as well as the clients and the entire content tone the client is looking for. So that every time we produce content for them, it's authentic. It's like they wrote themselves.
That's a really thorough answer, and there's so much good advice in what you just provided. So thanks for sharing that in detail. But it sounds like you agree that authenticity is of highest importance when it comes to marketing communications in 2020, and that's developed quite rapidly over the last decade or so. Is that something you've seen being in this space?
Absolutely. I mean, just from my experience working before I started Goodman Lantern, having that authentic way of dealing with customers, clients, partners, suppliers, team is what the difference really is between one company which produces, say, software and a company B which is exactly the same thing. It's there, for example, within our own company, we have 4 core values. Every person we hire in our company have to comply with those 4 core values. We actually test them before they join a company that they have those core values within them. So, for example, for example, this experimentation, helping our company to really have integrity, for example. So, for example, when we interview somebody, we'll ask them, in your life, for instance, when did you show a leadership skill, maybe with your sibling, for example, maybe as a RA in your sort of university, where you help people improve in their work. Because our thinking and the research shows that when people are a particular way in the social life, those skills and the way of being also reflects in their work as well. So if they have that in their own normal life, then they bring that to the company as well. So so in 19 we actually had to fire all our tech people and rehire people because they were not complying with our core values. And so it's really important that every company's core values are put into our sort of content, and authenticity is very important because at the end, it's not B2B or B2C, it's B2B, it's person to person. So authenticity is super important.
a bit of a loaded question for you, this next one on that topic. Are there any examples? You're welcome to use Goodman Lantern examples or not, but are there any examples of businesses that you think do a really great job of communicating with the values at the forefront of what they do in marketing?
Well, I mean, there's so many companies out there which have done a great job at that. I'm actually a part of a entrepreneurs group called EO, which stands for Entrepreneurs Organization, and there are n number of companies I've come across there who are absolutely driven by their core values. There's one company I came across when I was in Dublin, and unfortunately I don't remember the name now, which is a bit of a bad example, but they do garbage collection, and their mission is to make sure that not only that this obviously is it's a very hands-on job, and many a times obviously you're collecting garbage, so there's mess everywhere, but then the mission is to create a company which is clean. And when I say clean, they have clean books, they have clean business, they have clean products, and so they make sure that everything that they do is clean. And cleanness is part of their core value. Similarly, I've seen companies in EO, who have this thing whereby they say no passengers, as in this company, everybody has to work from the CEO to the PA. Everybody works, and there's no passengers in that company. Everybody has to work in order to produce the results. You know, Again, there is obviously, Google for a very long time had this thing where they said, do no evil, and they stuck to that thing. Obviously, now fast forward today, that's not part of the core value. It's very different from what it used to be. But back in the day, they were driven by doing no evil, and that was the USP, in my opinion, about them, of them.
Hmm. Well, I guess what I'm curious about as you're talking there is you've been, in terms of your work with Goodman Lantern, the company's been in operation, what, 6, 7 years now? Is that about right?
Yep, 6 years. Yep.
I'm curious to know, this isn't something I'd actually planned, but it's something you've just triggered a thought on. It's working on so many content projects over such a long amount of time. Have you seen the trend in content production moving towards any new mediums more recently? And I say that because there's always been a demand, as far as I can see, from our observations within marketing over the last decade, in support for production in content for social media and support for content production in terms of what you produce for your website and for email marketing as well. But I feel like there's a trend now, and I'm curious to know whether you think there's a trend in people moving beyond copy to rich media such as YouTube, podcasting, just audio content. Do you think that will be the end of content production, or do you think that's a very, very long way off?
Great question there, Scott. And just to kind of, before I answer this question, I want to just kind of mention that Napoleon was one of the sort of the master PR person, for example. He used to send press releases to gazettes in France to talk about his victories in order to really get the whole French media and the public on his side. So this is not a sort of a new art or a new phenomena. Content has been there for donkeys of years and much before Napoleon, and will be here for many years to come. Yes, the form changes. Yes, there's the entry of social media a few years back, which kind of made it in a different form. And social media content also can be can be short, long form content, for instance. Yes, there podcast is now making big waves, especially with C-level executives. I've recently come across that a lot of C-level executives, C-suite, for instance, spend a lot of time listening to podcasts when they do their exercise or the gym, for example. And the good thing about content writing is that it fits into all this. So we currently, for example, we do a lot of show notes, for example, for podcasts. We do a lot of scripts for videos, for instance. We do a lot of infographics, for example, again, content for that based on research. And content can fit into these different areas. At the end of the day, it is about having that story of the company put into different formats in different forms. It should be authentic to the company's style. Some companies prefer. We, for example, work with a very large a bridal show in the US, and they love interviews on videos and podcasts, and that's their style. So we help them support in that way. There's other company we work with who love their long form, high research content. So it's more like ebooks and research papers and white papers. Every company is different. Every company has a different style, and it's important for us to blend in with their authentic style and their customers, how they want to consume the information. And as I mentioned, our copy then changes to the format they want us to do. Videos will come. There will be interventions of different rich media in the future. At this point in time, we just don't know. I mean, what might happen in the next 10 years, but certainly there will be lots of innovation in this space.
I love that answer. You really got me thinking as you were talking there. And I'm glad you said what you did. So I'm someone who loves copy. I'm a copywriter at heart. I like long form content. I read books. That's my interest, my area. And so I hate to think that, and I don't think that copy is ever going to not be needed. I think although we've got audio content, or although we've got video content, I just think copy remains at the heart of all of those mediums. And so in a way, I actually, not that we were disagreeing, but I agree with you in the principle of what you were saying, in that you said that copy, the role of copywriters changes, and now you can support show notes for podcasts, or now you can support, script writing for a social media video. So it just there become new mediums in which copywriters can apply their skills. And that's how I think that space is developing. Now, there is a more technical orientated angle of discussion that I want to talk to you about. And that's, I understand now a little bit more about Goodman Lantern, what your goals are, how you achieve what you achieve. And I understand copywriting at scale and how maybe you develop that. But I also understand, and do correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a different arm of this business, which is software development. Can you maybe speak on that a little bit?
Sure. So, I mean, I'm an engineer by training. I went to did research in AI 15 years back, for example, at the University of Sussex in Brighton. And back then when I was doing AI, my mum thought AI is a study of UFOs. So that didn't really go well in terms of her understanding of AI. But today, AI is a big part of what innovation looks like, especially in social media, for example. In terms of technology, as I mentioned before, as the form of content changes or modifies, we go alongside that. We work primarily on copywriting and content writing, but many of our customers also like us to work with them on their websites, their marketing platforms to acquire more customers. And in there we help them with building new sites, some applications, and my knowledge and my previous experience in working on technologies and comes in nicely with that. So that's a secondary part of a business. Our focus certainly is content writing. We probably won't do technology development for a customer unless they have worked with content with Goodman Lantern first. So that's the sort of second step, as where our focus and our targeted sort of really focus attention is on content writing. And if we do software development, for example, that is because they're using content as part of their main strategy for this technology that we're building for them. So that's the way we look at. We have done, again, technology is all about digital technology, digital startups, all about experimentation. 6 years back when we began a company, we began in 3 different areas. We began market research, software development, and content writing. And we spend a lot of years to experiment and learn from our mistakes and narrow down to this one thing. We still own, for example, a SaaS platform, GoPin Leads, which is a yellow pages on steroids. So you can enter a niche and a city anywhere in the world. It'll give you all the major companies in that city for that niche in half a minute with their phone numbers, their email addresses, the LinkedIn, social media accounts, and that's something it was a fun thing to work on. But our focus still is content writing.
That's interesting. And actually, that transitions nicely into something I wanted to speak about before we kind of move into marketing technology and trends a little bit more. So I was going to touch on GoPin leads, but you've already kind of covered that. But I am curious to know then a more personal question related to your skills and experience. So you talked about being, I think, programming or learning basic from 7 years old, which is really young. So that's obviously something that you're interested in or have been interested in, and possibly is even a gift and something that comes naturally to you. But as time has developed, I'm curious, do you still look through marketing and business through a software engineer lens? So do you look at problems and think, that can be solved with software? Or do you look at it through more of a product management lens? Yeah. So you look now at, there's that problem, and here's the kind of product that we need to build it around, and then you outsource that actual product build or that service build?
It's a great question there, Scott. And I mean, potentially the answer here lies in the fact that as an engineer, my focus really is to take a problem and to find a solution which is more scalable. I think even while I was programming, for example, I wasn't the best, what's it called, code monkey, for example. I was never good at syntax, for example. I was very good at concepts, for instance. I'm very good, at understanding concepts, but not very great at sort of remembering all the semicolons and all the hashes, for example, everywhere. That's not my skill set. And even Goodman Lantern, my business really focus on taking a problem which is a everyday problem for businesses. For most scale up businesses today, they need content, for example, and 70% of tech businesses in the US, for example, outsource content. But then when they outsource the content, for example, they outsource it to one person, which they found through one freelancing website. And every time that when you do that, and the person who's coming to your team doesn't understand your business, your vision, your focus, your mission, they disappoint the customer. So my thinking was that how do we actually scale up this opportunity for any company in B2B in a quick and easy manner? And so I'm taking the approach of building small teams within content and approaching content like a programmer would or a product manager would, by building and scaling teams, which typically is difficult when you're working with a freelancer. As I mentioned before, it's about typical team of 4 people who really form one team. That's based on lots of experimentation, and that's an engineer mindset, for example. I don't know if I answered the question there, Scott, but that's my take on that.
No, you really did, and you've touched on a couple of topics that now I want to go off on a tangent on. So I'm curious to know whether the team at Goodman Lantern, are they all remote workers, or do you work out of London?
Our teams are across US, UK, South Africa, and the tech team is in India. As I mentioned, the team was meant to be remote because my business focus was to run it from a boat. So if I'm running from the boat, obviously they can't be on my boat. So they have to be having either their own boats or obviously
that would be a very scary manager if he just required you to work from his own boat.
Exactly.
Was that natural to you? So was managing a remote team something that was a natural ability of yours? So have you always been great at communication and delegation, or is that a skill that you've had to learn over the years as well?
Well, it's definitely a skill I have to learn. I mean, I think I was really, really crap at it when I first started. The first business, I think delegation was one of the reasons why it didn't go as planned. The whole business was, got a lot of PR, got a lot of press, but wasn't delegating. And also, it wasn't, forming the right team. The mindset of a team, which I have today, is that your company is the team. The team is the company. It's about giving your team the opportunity to make hard choices and let them lead the team. So we, for example, have 2 senior managers in a company who effectively run the company, and my aim really is to eventually delegate the entire responsibility of the running company and everything else in the company to the team, and then focus on some other other opportunity, for example. for example, currently the operations is completely delegated to managers who then have sub managers and then other managers under them. And it's important because as an entrepreneur, as a company founder, the aim is not to work in the business but on the business. And that's been my focus completely, is to kind of delegate things, give responsibility, and also the upside as well of the business. So our team managers, for example, get a monthly bonus based on the performance and the sales we get, for instance, and to impress the customers with the high quality of work we produce for them. So if we earn more, the managers earn more as well. So it's a fair way of working. It's a great way to motivate them, for example, and it's a great way to kind of be able to scale up the business and the payout to our team members as well.
A burning question that I really want to ask is, have you managed to work from a boat yet?
Well, I've worked from the seashore quite a few times, I must say, but boat, I must say, I haven't found good Wi-Fi or activity so far on the boat. So that's still something I have to achieve.
Okay, well, that's a good goal. That's still something on the horizon to achieve then. And the second thing that came to mind as you were talking, you were describing essentially the role of a product manager, and it occurred to me that in the last decade or so, I think the role of a product manager has become even more valuable and even more recognized. And I don't know if the role of product management in the way it exists today existed maybe 20 years ago. So I imagine there are lots of people that have probably been in similar positions to yourself, where maybe they've been technically proficient, but their skills have been better utilized to really be a visionary, be a catalyst for creating software or creating businesses, but maybe they haven't ever been given that freedom or that exploration because that role never existed. So as you were talking, I was just thinking to myself that that's something that I really appreciate over the last decade in marketing and technology, is that the role of product managers and how that's seen, in my perspective at least, how that role is been given more value. Is that something you've recognized as well?
I would say so. I mean, I think product managers now are at least the way looking at job descriptions today, for example, and I've obviously put some out for our company. I've seen others as well. They're almost like a mini CEO of a company. They run their own kind of show, and they're responsible for their department or their product, for example. And it takes more than just technical knowledge to run the company or that particular department. It needs skills in running teams, understanding profit and loss, P&L financial statements, for example. It needs to have good management overall. It's not just like as they would say in the past, like a geek who's kind of got the opportunity to run a company. It's actually, it needs a very well thought of, well crafted all-rounder as well run the product departments now.
Yeah, that's the thing that struck me. There's a lot of entrepreneurial skills involved in product management and vice versa. So I think a lot of people that are perhaps earlier in their careers that may be feeling the same way as maybe you once felt. You perhaps enjoyed software and programming, but maybe you had that vision that you could even do more. I think that's a great thing that role exists now for people that can make their entry into that market without necessarily, if they don't want to, having to become an entrepreneur and running their own business. That was just something that struck me as you were talking. And you also mentioned a word which I'm going to transition into, which was the word geek, because I see if there was ever a title, a professional title for geek, I think that you've had it in your role as an innovation consultant. I imagine that was a really geeky and enjoyable role. Can you maybe describe a little bit more about that role as an innovation consultant and maybe some examples about what you did in that role?
Yeah, so innovation consultant actually, traditionally, in some verticals is simply a programmer who is asked to build different programs. But my role wasn't that, unfortunately. Actually, fortunately, it wasn't that. It was actually to really help change the mindset. And one thing you talked about earlier on, Scott, was about remote working. Remote working is something which I bought into almost all my companies. In fact, the ones which have done well have had a remote culture. For example, in the European company I worked with, I was the first remote employee. I was the first non-Latin, non-Spanish team person in that company. And I was living in Brighton, working in Madrid. I spent my sometimes my weekends in Brighton and weekdays in Madrid. Sometimes I spent 2 weeks in Madrid and then 2 weeks in Brighton. So working remotely was a new thing for the company. They weren't happy about it initially, but it was kind of to tell them, listen, if you want to find the best talent, you won't find them all in the same city. It's impossible. Why don't we focus on finding the best talent across the world with the right mindset, the right values within them? And that same knowledge and way of working I used within the hen party company, which actually became the UK's biggest dance-based hen party company when finally I did, it was finally acquired. But I mean, remote working, it works really, really well. Secondly, it's about empowerment. Today, for example, in Goodman Lantern, we are champions of empowering women. We campaign for men and women to have equal pay, and this is in line with the UN SDG number 5. So as a male founder, I've seen many founders and board members or women who didn't get the same opportunity as men did, and I'm not going to stand for that. I just had a daughter a month back, and I don't want her to
Oh,
come
well,
up in this
congratulations.
world. Oh, thank you very much, Scott. I don't want her to come in the world where there's so much inequality. I want to make sure that we work to a fair way of working. So empowering your team is super important, and innovation is it's part of innovation really. It's really making sure that your team has the same power, has the same drive as the founder of the company or the CEO of the company, and they also paid in the same way as well. So if they do more, they put in more effort, and they make a change happen, then they should be at right remuneration as well. So that's part of innovation. I mean, apart from that, obviously there are a lot of technology stuff, a lot of AI innovations. When I went to the company, they were doing just literally PC based support, and I bought in 2010, smartphone, Mac, for example. It really helped them, build new platforms. For example, we were servicing the insurance telecom market. We were giving them a technology assistance service, which they bundle in with their core services. So for a telecom company, you would give them a SIM card and data bundle, and you'll also give them our support services. So basically, you can ask for support to fix your computer, your mobile phone. And when I first began, it was only for the PC with this company, and I came in and I built them, platforms for the smartphone, for Mac, how to support them through video, or support them through live chat, support them through remote support, for example. That itself, brought them, every year they were growing, almost 2x to 3x year on year. So again, I think that's part of the innovation, but that wouldn't be possible if there was a fundamental shift towards a more empowered workforce and this new way of working.
There's a good distinction that you made as well, and that innovation doesn't always have to be technology related. You talked there about innovation in just working practice and looking at remote working or making sure that there's equality in the workplace. I think innovation can sometimes be seen as how I introduced it, actually, as the geeky thing, as the technology based thing. But innovation is far beyond that. And if you look at people and behavior, then generally you can get to the heart of being innovative as well, I think. So that's really fascinating to me. And another thing you touched on, I've lost my train of thought a little bit. You touched on remote working. Oh yeah, that's I was just thinking that seeing as you've had practice in doing this, are you well accustomed to the life that everyone's living at the moment? Are you thriving in this environment of people working from home?
I love it. I mean, I always thought this was going to be the way of working, and come the pandemic, and everybody's forced to work remote. And some companies don't like it, and others have embraced it. The reality, I always think, is that we need to find people who are motivated, who are driven, and they can be based anywhere they want to be based. They can be traveling, they can be digital nomads, for example. They could be working part time, they could be working full time, they could be working night, they could be working a day. As long as they are available for meetings, for example, and as long as they are driven for the same common goal to succeed for themselves and the company, doesn't matter what they're doing. I mean, they don't have to be wearing, a tie and suit. every day. They can be wearing pajamas for who cares? Who gives a damn? To be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. No. By the way, I'm fully supportive of that message. I'm a managing director of a marketing agency, and I've seen huge benefits from people working from home, and I've personally found it really enjoyable and found that it's just helped me with my well-being, my health, and I've seen more pros than cons. So it's nice to hear that you already were well adapted and that you think that well as well. And I'm hoping that even though the reason is negative, no one wants a pandemic, the outcome might be positive with people being able to work from home and that becoming more of a company norm, which is great. I'm going to transition slightly into, it's in the technology realm of questioning, but I noticed, I think it was from LinkedIn, it looked like you have been more involved and seeking MarTech investments and being in that world a little bit more. Is that the case? Have you started to get more into marketing technology investing over this last year or so? Is that new? Is that something that you've always done?
It's a new thing for me. I'm actually looking to actively invest as an angel investor into companies who are in marketing technology, because I find it fascinating. And it's an area which I think about, I sleep, I drink. I might as well invest in something to actually understand. So that's the theory, and also it's a way to kind of give back as well. There are a lot of really clever entrepreneurs, people who have ideas, who want to succeed, and they don't have the working capital. For a small investment, actually, they can see the idea go really far and can lead to next round of investing or next round of customers. That's my message. I mean, I've always built companies which are customer driven. So what that mean by that is I never raised capital after my first business. All my companies have been financed by our customers, and that's the way I work. But there are some companies who cannot perform without initial capital. Some companies who need some working capital for the founder to live on. They can build a company, then generate some cash from customers. So for those kind of companies, I'm really keen to kind of help invest in the business if it makes sense. Obviously, not only help them with the money, but also advisory as well. And also, obviously, if there's a synergy with our customers, then happily introduce them to our customers as well.
Yeah, so I mean that's really interesting, and the fact you're getting into that area of investment as well. So I am curious to know what you're looking out for, because in the MarTech space there is so much development and so many products being built. It's almost overwhelming. You can go to a website like Product Hunt and find hundreds of new apps or products being built every day in the area of marketing. So what is it that is there anything that you're specifically looking out for? What ticks the box and gets you interested and might encourage you to look further?
I would say a company which is focusing on B2B has a interesting content component to it. Ideally, it doesn't have to be, but if they have a content component to it, then it's really interesting. Maybe it's SEO, maybe it's content for brand building, for example, or something else to link to content. More importantly, though, is the right mindset. I don't invest in companies. I invest in people. That's my mission as a person. And if the person has the right values, actually is passionate about what they do, maybe it's not this business they'll make it in, maybe the next business, but investing in them is what's going to lead me to success. And so it's an investment in the long term, into the future. Potentially, they will, if they're happy with my investment in this business, then they will bring me into their next venture as well. And hopefully, we all will make good money together.
That's interesting, because one of my questions for you was going to be, in this process of angel investing, I was kind of going to ask what you look for, whether it's in a pitch situation or whether it's in your research process. But you kind of gave me the answer there, is that you're really looking for the traits or characteristics and skills of the person. And that sounds like it's of a higher importance to you almost than the product itself or where they're at in that product's life cycle.
Yes, I think one needs to be hungry and driven, because from my own story, I can tell you that the first business typically might not hit the spot, but for example, one of my investors, which who's now in Goodman Lantern, was also there in my first business. and he understands that there's passion and there's a drive there, and that we will eventually make it, and so he stuck along, and then next business he comes in again with the investment, and so shows his drive and his passion, and also it is about betting on the right horse. That's the most important bit for me, and it's about that person more than anything else.
On the topic of trends within this space, so you must consume a lot of content. I think you just said you think about it day and night, so you must consume a lot of content and information related to the MarTech space. I'm curious to know from your perspective what you're seeing at the moment in terms of problems that are being solved or attempted at being solved in the marketing space. So, for example, are you seeing lots of SEO products? Or you're seeing lots of podcasting products? Are you seeing lots of analytics products? Are there any trends in that area that you can speak on?
Well, I would say, Scott, all the above. There's literally innovation happening. As you mentioned, Product Hunt has, hundreds of new products coming out every day. It's almost shocking to see that. I mean, there's someone innovating somewhere in the world, and launching new products all the time. I think what's interesting for me, though, is that, in the content space, for example, there's a big drive now using, open AI and GP3, for example, on generating content automatically. The overall drive, it seems to me, is about automation. Is about how can you minimize the time and effort by the company's team members, and actually let the bots, the cloud, the infrastructure kind of help you deliver stuff. I mean, OpenAI GPT-3, which I mean, if you have come across before, is basically a technology which can be used in different forms. It's basically AI, machine learning, which can generate content for you automatically. I think that's interesting. Take on content. So you basically enter. I saw some examples. For example, there was one example where you put in the technologies you want to find in a job description, and it will make your whole job description automatically within
Wow.
seconds. There are examples of, for example, work descriptions. You just put in some descriptions, and it will, based on its knowledge about and looking at different examples, it will give you a work description for e-commerce product, for instance. Really powerful stuff. Still not as accurate as you would imagine it to be. But this is a fundamental shift in sort of the way we might see content be produced. Maybe some part of the content will be produced by the bots. For example, now if you look in Gmail, as you enter your text on Gmail, it recommends certain bits for you to use, and actually it saves you some time. It saves you some computational power, and actually it allows you to kind of write emails even faster without thinking of the grammatical parts to it, for instance. So there will be these kind of assistants coming out very soon, which will be super accurate. So if you put some text in the text editor, you will get other bits recommended by the bot or by the AI, which is very interesting. As I mentioned, still it is not super accurate. Time will make it better, and I don't look at this as a threat to our business. We have to adapt to this new technology coming in, and we work together to think about what the role of a good content planner, content creator really is, and where can it be even more in depth and true to the company and their story than just a automated bot giving you text, for example.
Just a couple of questions that I've got to close out this podcast on this topic. That's so interesting. And it's funny because our conversation with that, without realizing it, I realize it's come full circle, because it just suddenly occurred to me that you've obviously got this experience from working on content production and working in a content production company and leading that company. And then you have this, which you touched on at the very, very beginning. Is it a master's degree that you have in artificial intelligence?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, so you've had that as well, which I think you achieved that master's degree. I remember reading about 15 years ago, something around that mark.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, though the principles probably haven't changed in artificial intelligence, the access to both resource, the way in which AI technology has changed over those years has increased and changed massively in these last 15 years. So now it's weird, but I realize that you're in a position where you understand the authenticity, and you've built a company based on building authentic content, but you also have that really interesting AI background, which makes you gives you this unique perspective on where AI can support that authenticity. But it doesn't feel like we're there yet. And by the way, I'm speaking, that's from my perspective. I've not seen too many content orientated AI products that have really, I would say, been excellent. So from a content production perspective, as you said, the accuracy is not there yet, but it's getting there. So it sounds like that's the thing that you're really curious about, and that's what you're looking out for. AI products that connect with content and just do a better job and are more accurate than what we've seen over these last few years.
Again, I mean, when I was studying AI, it actually was meant to be a PhD, but I didn't want to spend all my sort of time and like do research and not make some money for myself. So I kind of cut it short and did a master of research, and then started my first business. But I think AI has a great opportunity in this space. When I was studying, for example, in masters, we were building machine learning stuff, but we never didn't have the resources to actually implement it. It was all theoretical. And by the way, just to kind of mention, at university, I was building game AI. So I was building video games, for example, and how to make bots. The sort of the enemy in the first person shooter game to be more smart. And for example, how do they take a smart path in the video game to kind of win against the real human being? For instance, that's the kind of stuff I was building, which is not similar to the AI we use for machine learning, for example. It's different, but I mean the principles are there. And I think in the next 5-10 years we'll see some really great products coming out, and I can't wait for them to come out and play with them and implement them potentially in our business as well.
Just lastly on this thought, are there any marketing problems, that you think people are trying to solve using technology, maybe even using AI, that you don't think AI can solve or should be used to solve?
Well, I mean, I saw this documentary on Netflix, The Social Dilemma.
I've not seen that yet. I have not
Okay,
seen that.
worth a watch. I would say it's definitely worth a watch. And I think great that as human beings we have come up with technology which can think like human beings. It can almost kind of force people down a particular route. It can influence people. Especially super helpful for platforms like Facebook and the ad platform to make more money, for instance. But there is a moral dilemma there, which is that the way it influences younger people and how it influences them in a negative way to be the perfect kind, to force them in a particular route where they don't want to go, for example. That is not great. That's the negative side of AI, which I think again, like for example we have in our financial system, like we have for example in our everyday lives, where we have a body which has rules and regulations on what we can and cannot do. I think there's a time has come today or now to actually implement rules for what AI should be doing, especially for vulnerable people like children, for example, because it is not helpful to influence them in that way. We need to also be careful that this can lead to adults as well seeing only a one-sided campaign. For example, in politics, for instance, now the U.S. elections happening. If you are supporting a particular party, then you only see that kind of content, and then you don't see the other side of the coin, which is not great. Now, I know this has been happening for many years before social media came out and AI was used within social media, with media in general. But because now this can be done at scale and it can influence people so much, and given that we spend so much time on these devices and these programs and applications, I think there's come a time that we have certain regulations and regulatory framework around AI and how it's used to influence people.
And you mentioned earlier in the episode about having a daughter. And is that your first child?
It is indeed, yes.
And does having a child change your perspective on AI in the future and the ethics of AI?
Yes, I look at this from both perspectives of that it will make life easier for her as when she becomes an adult, because there will be certain things which she can just quickly allocate or delegate to this bot, for example. Could be a
Mm,
physical robot, could be a machine running in the cloud, for example. But also, yes, it can, it will manipulate potentially her thinking, her thoughts as well, which is a bit
mm,
scary. Other thing also is the job roles which we will have for ourselves. No, let's look back for a second and think. There used to be a job role for a typist in every company. That doesn't exist anymore. There's no typist anymore. There's no operator today, rarely, who will put a cable for a trunk call to a foreign land. That doesn't happen anymore. Now we have computers and electronics doing that for us. So there will be a change in the jobs which these young people will have eventually, and there will be new dilemmas that they will come across because of these bots they have powered by AI. So there will be a different way of being, and I do worry for them. But if we have the right things in place to regulate these AI and to actually showcase that there is a bot running behind which will influence you, I think there's a hope for her and many others like her.
mm. Yeah, that's an amazing thought. It's going to be really interesting, like you said, to see what the next 5 or 10 years how they unfold. And we can all see the benefits, and I think we can all we have to be conscious of the risks. I need to check out the social dilemma, so I'm definitely going to do that. I might even do that later tonight after this episode because it will be on my mind. There was only one other quick question that I've got before I close out, and I'm curious to know, out of all of the AI assistants, so Cortana, Google Assistant, Alexa, any preferences from you? Which do you use on a daily basis?
I don't use any of them.
Oh, interesting. Why not?
Well, number one is that my wife is not very keen to have someone listening to our conversations. That's
Okay.
number one. Number two, I have built some of these things in theoretically at least at university, and I'm not very comfortable getting my information or the way I think, for example, within the memory, even if it's not, sort of serializing, me and my data. I just don't
Mm,
want it to happen. So,
interesting.
I know it sounds like a very odd thing to do for an AI, somebody said AI, for example, but I don't use any of these automated tools like Siri, for example.
Well, no, it's funny you say that, and that's the reason I asked the question, because in a way I actually expected that answer, because you are so conscious of the capabilities that you've made a conscious decision maybe to not invest in them for the reasons you've just discussed. And it's funny because from a marketing perspective, everyone expects maybe me to be on social media, and because I'm interested in marketing, I spend all my time there. But actually, I don't do that, and it's for similar reasons. I think you can take an active interest in a topic without actively participating, and I think that might be the case. I'm more of an introvert and private person than not, and so I'm very similar when it comes to my approach of using assistants and social media and things like that. So I found that answer really fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. Raj, you've been such a great guest and delivered so much useful information. I want to thank you for your time. Before I let you go, do you want to let the listeners of this show know where they can find out more about you, connect with you, Goodman Lantern, Gopin Leads, anything you want to share?
Well, I was going to say, obviously, if you Google Goodman Lantern, hopefully you'll find it as the first link, given that we do content and SEO. So goodmanlantern.com is otherwise the URL, and you can find me on LinkedIn if you just search for Raj Goodman Anand, and yeah, connect with me, drop me a message. I love to hear from people, so certainly get in touch. And Scott, thank you for the opportunity. It's been great talking to you. I've really enjoyed the podcast today.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. I'll end on this final thought because it's something I thought about earlier. We both laughed when you said you told your mother, that you were going to study artificial intelligence, and she asked if it was anything to do with UFOs, or she assumed that it was. And we both laughed. But But hey, who knows, Raj? Maybe UFOs are AI and they're traveling from our future. Who knows? I'll leave that thought out there to end this podcast. Thanks so much for your time and take care.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Scott. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Bye-bye.